The Alaska Highway, which is often called the Alcan, travels almost 1,400 miles from Dawson Creek, British Columbia to Delta Junction in Alaska. It is one of North America's iconic road trips and one that many people drive every summer on their way to Alaska to explore the last frontier. I decided to travel the route with my dad in the summer of 2023, and we spent 6 days exploring this beautiful part of both Canada and the United States. It is one of those road trips we will never forget. Here's the full journey, and be sure to stay till some of the later days as it just keeps getting more and more beautiful. Also, there's an ebook linked in the description if you want to do this drive yourself.
Hey everybody, Josh and Pops. Today we're starting another road trip on the Alaska Highway, about 1,360 miles. You ready to go?
This is going to be an epic trip. I'm so excited. We've been looking forward to this for so long.
Let's do it.
Our journey began with our arrival at the Alaskan Highway sign and historic mile marker number 0.
Official starting point of the Great Alaskan Highway.
It's a popular spot even for people who aren't doing the drive, so you'll definitely have to wait in order to grab a photo.
We're not spending any time in Dawson Creek today because we did it yesterday. I will show you all of that right now.
My dad and I arrived in Dawson Creek the previous day so that we could have a few hours of exploring and then head out early the next day. You know how many adventures we cram in a day, so we needed as much time as possible. We started by heading to the visitor center, which is right next to the Alaska Highway sign. Here you can find knowledgeable people to tell you about the drive. There's lots of different things that you can purchase, and there's even a small museum.
Check it out. It's what we're going to be seeing in Alaska later, bears catching fish.
This is kind of actually how they do it. They reach down with their hands and they carry it around. You don't need to go anywhere else to see this. That's perfect. Look at that.
The museum mainly focuses on the area's history, but there is a small spot in the back that has history on the Alaska Highway. There wasn't a lot here, but there were some old photographs that were cool to see. On the other side of the gift shop, there's another small museum on the rail station that you can see as well.
Howdy, sir. One ticket to Alaska, please.
Be sure to grab some of the free maps and information booklets before you head out, and then go over to the grain elevator next. This is the only remaining of 8 grain elevators that used to sit here, and it's now home to an art gallery.
There's also a whole bunch of old historic photos from the Alaska Highway, so be sure to look in the stairwell as well. I have a video of Pops doing the exact same pose in the Alaska video. Are you gonna do it when we get to the end of the road trip as well?
Absolutely. He'll remember me.
The last thing you should see if you're interested in history is the Pioneer Village on the outside of Dawson Creek. When we went, it was only open on Saturdays and Sundays from 10 to 4, so be sure to check that before you go.
Pops, check it out. It's your first time on the Alaskan Highway. Sticking your head in something. Are you gonna be the woman or the man? No civilians allowed in this area. Patrolman Pops is on the job.
The museum focuses on a lot of the early pioneers that settled in the area, and it has over a dozen different buildings, many of which you can walk into.
The main reason for us to come here was for this building, which is the story of the Alaska Highway. Here's the path we're gonna be driving, starting in Dawson Creek right there, and then we're going all the way to the end point, Big Delta Junction.
We'll get into a lot more history while we're on the route, but basically the highway was built between 1942 and 1943. The whole purpose was to create a road that allowed the United States to easily get to Alaska if needed to defend it during the war.
Now that we've learned all of the history of the Alaska Highway, all that's left is for our adventure.
Your adventure, meaning our adventure. I am totally excited about this adventure, I want to say too. This is going to be amazing.
To end the day, we headed over to Post and Row, which was a great dinner spot in Dawson Creek. It's a little more upscale, but the food was delicious and we were definitely not disappointed. Alright, now back to our first day driving the Alaska Highway. Before heading out of Dawson Creek, you can go downtown and see the murals that they created for the 75th anniversary of the highway, and you can also go over to another starting point sign if you're interested. Our end goal for the night was Fort St. John, and I do have to say that the first day on the Alaskan Highway is the least exciting of any of the days, so be sure to stay with us to the end. Our first stop, about 25 minutes outside of the city, was to pull off and see the Kiskatna Bridge.
So this old bridge is definitely closed to driving traffic, but the people at the visitor center said that we could still go and walk on it.
To access the bridge, you need to take about a 5-minute detour off the main road, but it's definitely worth seeing.
So this is the only original wooden bridge that was built back when they built the highway that's still here and was still in use until a couple years ago when a landslide came through. They haven't been able to fix it for cars to go on it again, but you can walk on it and it is definitely worth the short excursion off the road.
The bridge was built in 1942 and it sits high above the river below. It's 534 feet or 162 meters long.
When you come out here, you're basically driving on the original road because you can see some of it's paved, but some of it isn't. So that would be the original unpaved Alaskan highway right there.
Heading on, you'll reach the town of Taylor, which has a few small stops, with the first being Peace River Park and the Peace River Bridge.
If you need a spot to chill for a few minutes, there's a picnic bench with the Peace Bridge, plus there's also a area for kids to play over there as well.
Crossing the Peace Bridge and entering the town of Taylor, we made a stop at mile 35 and the visitor center.
This is the original Peace Bridge. You can see what happened to that one in 1957.
The visitor center at Taylor was tiny, but it's a great place to ask questions, get more information on the highway, and learn a little bit more about the history.
I stopped into this visitor center right here and they had a copy of this book, which looks awesome. There's so many different places, 200 of them to see. So I'm excited to use this to kind of check some off as we go along. It even has a playlist that you can scan for driving songs.
As you leave the town of Taylor, you'll enter Fort St. John, which also has another popular museum.
Let's turn on the lights first. We're the first people in the museum today.
Yeah, really nice.
We've been mainly focusing on Alaska highway history when we go to these museums, so there's one small section in the back. And here's an official stop sign from the Alaska Highway in 1942.
This is probably the biggest museum we went to on our first day on the drive, so there's a lot of other history here. As you guys know, we like to show you everything you can possibly do on a drive, so you might not be a big fan of museums, but we're just giving you options, and there's a lot more amazing nature coming. Leaving Fort St. John behind, there's a small stop along Charlie Lake that you can see if you're interested.
So this memorial is to 12 American soldiers who were working on the Alaska Highway who died when their pontoon boat sunk.
Heading on from there, we started to get hungry and we stopped at a spot about 15 minutes down the road.
So it's about lunchtime for us and the person at the visitor center told us to come here. I'm gonna check it out, see how it is.
The Shepherd's Inn is a local spot with a restaurant, gas station, and hotel that's been here for 41 years.
You know you're in a different place when they got Cheese Whiz and Nutella as options on the side of the table. I don't see either one of those in the United States.
This is bannock. It was something that we had to try when we were in Canada. It almost looks like a pancake, but it's flour, water, and they say sometimes fat lard, sometimes sugar or milk. It was a staple of early settlers' diets. It's really good. It's like a biscuit consistency. I think it would be good to put some butter or some jam on it, but definitely a nice addition, especially to a meal like this with the breakfast food.
Yeah, somewhere between a biscuit and a pancake. A little sweet. Oh, it's fun.
Good spot for a nice hearty meal if you're looking for that. We're heading about 100 miles before our next stop.
For the first day driving on the Alaskan Highway, it's beautiful and green with lots of trees, but not a lot of mountains. You'll basically be driving through a remote part of British Columbia with some construction, a few gas stations, and a few restaurants along the way.
So here's the deal. We got a bet. $5 Canadian to the first guy who sees a moose. $5 Canadian to the first guy who sees a bear. So there's a potential $10 Canadian bet here. Who do you think's going to win?
I have no Canadian dollars, so
you'll have to pay me in American dollars.
And I owe you. This is what today has looked like. Lots of trees and basically not much else to see or to stop at.
But beautiful. Big sky.
There are also a fair amount of rest stops with bathrooms every 20 to 30 miles and information plaques at some of them.
First bear sighting. Pops owes me $10 Canadian dollars.
No, only 5.
Hey Bear, there's a good meal right here, Pups.
Tastes like chicken.
We got really lucky in British Columbia, and this is the first of many bears we see along this drive. We didn't have any other stops planned until we got to Fort Nelson, which is about 4.5 hours drive from where we started in Dawson Creek. It's incredibly remote out here, and even things that said they might be there in the book were often not there anymore.
We made it to Fort Nelson, but first things first, where's my bear money at?
He not only saw the first one, he saw the first 3.
3 bears. I'll take it. Maybe you'll get it back if you find the moose first.
If I find the moose.
Also, this looks like a pretty strong stop.
The Fort Nelson Heritage Museum was our last major stop on day 1 and my favorite of the museums we saw on the entire route. Be sure to check the hours online as it's only open a few days a week and you don't want to miss it if you're interested in the area's history.
These are the guys we saw on the roads. They are black bears and they can move fast.
This museum was the life's work of one man named Marl. Their website says that in 1957 he worked as a mechanic in the Canadian Army and saw so many different things being thrown away that he decided he wanted to save them. In the 70s, he had collected so many things that he needed a place to store them, and after fundraising, the museum was opened in 1987.
It's only a little bit on the Alaska Highway here, but there's some old photos and a little bit more information. Yeah, this place is incredibly epic, but incredibly overwhelming.
Here you can see everything from construction equipment that was used for the Alaska Highway to different historic buildings and all sorts of other things.
It's cool. I mean, the inside is all about tools and things that they built, which is what the highway is all about. So it's interesting to kind of see that kind of a museum like that, that's all around building and producing things like that.
And this is another of the 7 buildings they have. This one's all dedicated to cars.
There really is a lot to see here, and we didn't do it justice as we came right near when they were closing and we had already had a pretty long day of exploring. There was a docent that came by to show us in a few buildings though, which was pretty cool.
Look at the neck on this mannequin.
Oh my gosh.
That is a good neck right there. Hey look, Pops, there's another one we found for you. Oh, you're a settler in Fort Nelson. I would give that museum 2 thumbs up. That was very cool. You could spend a lot of time there. There's an overwhelming amount of stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, and the docents were very, very helpful. So
Yeah, definitely see it on your drive.
Our last order of business was to get something to eat, and this place came highly recommended to us in the small town of Fort Nelson.
So we're ending our day with something that's Canadian. They call it a donair. Pops, what is it?
it's a Canadian take on a hero.
We had a, whatever we had for lunch, I don't remember what it's called, so now we're trying this Canadian delicacy.
Yeah, very different. I mean, it's not bad. It's pretty good, actually. Very different.
So with that, our first day on the Alaska Highway is done. We will see you tomorrow. Starting day 2 on the Alaska Highway.
For our second day on the Alaska Highway, we set out early as we had a full day with 6 hours of driving and lots of stops that we wanted to do along the way. I also knew that this is where the drive started to get beautiful, so I wanted to make sure we had the most time to just soak it all in.
Pops, do you ever not turn off when you see a sign that says Cinnamon Bun Center?
When it's accompanied by lots of stuff in books about these are the best anywhere. We will see.
Have to do it.
We will see.
Cinnamon Bun Center of the Galactic Cluster.
Cinnamon buns are actually a thing on the Alaska Highway, and there's multiple places that sell them along the way. However, the ones at Tetsa River Lodge are probably the most highly recommended.
Have bun, will travel.
We skipped breakfast and just made our way here to grab coffee, and we each got our own cinnamon bun. In hindsight, we probably could have just gotten one to share. They're that big.
Pops is diving into the famous cinnamon roll.
That's a cinnamon roll. I would say it is one of the best I've had.
Yeah?
Very nice.
Yeah, just the right breading to sweet consistency, gooey, warm. What's not to like about that? Pops, can you please use this for the rest of the trip? I don't want any sniveling from you, all right?
Sniveling?
No sniveling.
Sniveling?
Just so you're not disappointed, that place is closed on Mondays, so don't come through here on a Monday or you won't get a cinnamon roll. Heading on.
After saying goodbye to the cinnamon buns, we began a great section of the Alaska Highway.
We stopped at this random pull-off, Tetsa River Bridge number 2, because look at this view.
My dad and I are always keeping our eyes peeled when we're on these drives, and we often just pull off at the side of the road if we see anything that we're interested in taking a photo of. What I didn't realize when we pulled off here though was that we were about to enter the Stone Mountain Provincial Park, which is what I thought was one of the most beautiful spots in the entire Alcan. I've never really wanted to have an RV, but when I got to Summit Lake Campground, I would have loved to have spent a few days here. Check out my friend Traveling Robert on YouTube, who did a video on the Alcan and he was able to stay here.
If y'all are camping, how do you beat this campground? Definitely look it up. I'm trying to get this show on the road, but Pop's found a spot and I can't get him to leave.
Just grab me on your way back from Anchorage.
I'll see you in like 30 days.
I would have loved to have gone on a few hikes here, but unfortunately for us, we had to continue on.
We're looking for this sign for Summit Pass, which shows that we're at the highest point. This is technically the highest point on the Alaska Highway.
For the next 2 hours or so of driving, the road is stunning and different at every turn. There are lakes, rivers, massive mountains, and deep valleys. These are the types of views that you think about when you think of British Columbia and Alaska. It probably goes without saying, but this is a really remote area with not a lot of services, and you should definitely get gas before you get in here. As we crossed the bridge over Racing River, we noticed that there were some beautiful views back the way we came, so we turned around, went back, found a pullout, and explored. There was a small gas station near Toad River if you need it, but do note that these aren't always guaranteed to be open when you come through. One of the best sections was when the road was going right along the river with massive mountains in both directions.
Ever since we entered Muncho Lake Provincial Park, it has been insane views.
It's gorgeous everywhere you look. Just beautiful.
Soon after, the road went around another bend and we were greeted by Muncho Lake. Muncho Lake is in the top 3, if not the most beautiful place along the entire drive. There are lots of turnouts along the left-hand side so you can pull out whenever you want to look at the lake.
Wow, this is so cool. It's not even fully sun and it's still amazing. Look at how clear the water is and look at all the different colors as it goes out.
The lake is about 12 kilometers or 7.5 miles long.
You guys, can you even believe this spot? Look at this. Looks like something out of a dream.
This is amazing, and it's even overcast, but look how incredibly beautiful it is. My God.
2 out of 10.
2?
The park website describes it as a rare jewel, and I have to say that's probably the best way you could ever describe it.
All right, I think I'm done with the Alaska Highway. I've seen the most beautiful part. I'm heading back to California. What?
So nothing left to see.
Yep.
This is another place I'd love to come back and spend some more time hiking, fishing, doing whatever other adventure activities they have to offer. Unfortunately, the rain moved in on us though, so we kept going. This is the first of many reminders that the weather can change on you quickly, and also to watch out for wildlife.
We're heading out on a 1.5 kilometer, about 3/4 of a mile round trip to the Salt Lick viewing area. We're now in the area where you want to make sure that you have bear spray.
Apparently when you need bear spray, you make the old man go first.
Yeah, he's the one with the spray. I don't have any spray. I'm just hoping you protect me. Even though this is just a short trail, it really feels fun to be out hiking in British Columbia along the Alaska Highway.
This trail is basically a single track that heads downhill as you make your way to the viewpoint. There's trees surrounding you most of the way, so you can't really see any of the views until you get to the end.
We're almost to the viewpoint, and I think this is gonna be a pretty good one. That's the Trout River Mineral Lick behind us. Wow, that is One of the best views I've ever seen for a quarter-mile trail.
It's beautiful. The river and the huge salt lick with the minerals in it. Yeah. Very unique. This kind of structure here with this muddy looking thing, it's very different than everything else that you see around.
This trail is in Muncho Lake Provincial Park and it looks out over the Trout River. It's often a good place to spot wildlife as well, as they come up and they lick the minerals from the salt licks. We didn't see any wildlife when we were there, but we were just thankful to have the rain stop.
What do you think, Pops, about time to go soak in a hot spring?
Yeah, I think I need to go soak my head.
Our anticipation was building as we headed towards the world-famous Liard Hot Springs, but you know we have to stop whenever we see anything of interest, and for me, bridges are always of interest, so we had to stop at the Liard River Bridge.
Wow, right when you cross the bridge on the right-hand side, there's a little path that takes you down and gives you this view.
This bridge was built in 1943, but after taking in the views, it was time to go to the hot springs. When we arrived at the park, we were greeted by a 15-minute line to pay our fee to get in. Also note that if you don't have towels, you can rent them here.
Going through the electric fence.
This is an active bear area and it's about a half-mile walk just to get to the hot springs, so do be prepared. We got lucky while we were walking as there was a mama moose and her baby right along the boardwalk.
Could this sign be any more perfect? Moose and minerals. And look, there's some moose.
We spent a good 10 minutes just taking it all in before we continued walking.
Is it hot?
Surface is really hot.
That might be the hot part. You might not want to go in on that section.
My dad went right to the hot springs, but I saw a sign for hanging gardens and decided I needed to check that out before I went in. It's about 1/10 of a mile to walk to the top of the trail, and there's 2 different viewpoints along the way.
It's pretty unique. The water's just cascading off that mountain back there. So there's a little waterfall and then it's just going all the way down the hill into the pool. You can see the water just coming right underneath the stairs and then going right down the other side. It's basically the worst time for a hot spring, but I gotta get in because I'm on the highway. It's hot outside.
After exploring the rest of the boardwalk, it was back to the hot springs to soak. They have a small changing room here and bathrooms if you need them. Basically, the way that it's laid out is that it's the most hot at one end and then it gets gradually cooler as you make your way down. It is weird the way that the water flows, as it's very hot on the top of the water and then down below it's not as hot, and you can actually move the water around to kind of cool it down.
It is a lot hotter than the water I was in over there.
For me though, the best spot was towards the end where the water was much cooler and you could explore more. You could basically walk down the water as far as you want, and there was even a small little ravine you could walk into that had some cool pictures.
That was a really nice stop on the Alaska Highway. Hopefully it's not as hot when you come so you can enjoy it a little bit more, but even with it being hot, it was still pretty nice.
It was nice, yeah.
As we got back on the road, almost immediately we saw our next wildlife sighting.
And it's a day of wildlife. We saw a buffalo now too.
Buffalo, caribou, bears, this is awesome.
About 20 minutes down the road, we had a detour to go to Smith River Falls. The road to get out here is pretty sketchy and only one lane, so definitely don't come out here in anything big.
Here we are at Smith River Falls. We heard that the trail was washed out, so this is about the best we can do. And this road is not something I would recommend for an RV. It's a bit rough.
But it is a pretty good view, even without being able to hike down to it.
Smith River Falls is about 35 meters or 115 feet tall. It's really far away from the viewing area, but it's still a beautiful waterfall to see. After making it back down the road, it was another 15-minute drive to our next stop.
Next up, we turned off to see Whirlpool Canyon.
It's supposed to be not a rapids, a whirlpool.
I mean, it does kind of look like it's been flowing in a circle, like Pop said. There's some water maybe coming back up right there, and then look at all the debris that's out here.
As the raging water goes past the rock, it's forced around this bend and it brings rock and debris up along the edge. Back on the road, we quickly saw another dozen or so wildlife sightings.
We've already seen so many buffalo that we have to debate whether we want to stop each time we see one. That's a good problem to have. This is Allen Viewpoint. Hopefully there's a view somewhere. Maybe over there. Bob's how this viewpoint is, and he said it's basically just a very large river flowing.
But I said it was beautiful.
This monument is dedicated to the surveyors of the Alaska Highway. Their skill and dedication made construction of this route possible.
If you thought the road was remote before, keep heading north, as there's nothing around here.
We are about to cross over into the Yukon for only a short period of time. This is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. We have made it to the Yukon.
Welcome to the Yukon, baby, yeah!
Woo!
The Yukon is just one of those things that you read about in books and hear about as you're growing up, and it's amazing to be able to see it with your own eyes.
Check it out, it's the Yukon British Columbia border right here. I am in both places, Yukon and British Columbia. Wow, that was really amazing that time we spent in the Yukon. Pops, what did you think?
Yukon's an epic place. Not much going on there, but
But it's still pretty epic.
yeah, I'd like to go back sometime.
Well, British Columbia, here we come.
Hooray! Back in British Columbia. Look how beautiful.
Right when you cross over again, keep your eyes peeled for Contact Creek.
So Contact Creek is an important point historically on the Alaska Highway. The 340th Regiment was coming down from Whitehorse, and the 35th Regiment was coming up from Dawson Creek. And this is the place where they finally met to complete the southern portion of Alcan. There's an interesting book that you can read that tells kind of the history, particularly of the 35th Regiment that was coming up from the south, that I'd really recommend. I've enjoyed reading it. Gives you a lot of color on the background of the highway.
Especially when the only thing they have for Contact Creek is this sign. That's it.
That's it.
All right, we finished British Columbia, and
we
we
are
are back in the Yukon.
Is there a sign this time?
This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. We have made it to the Yukon!
We made it to Yukon!
And just like that, we're back in British Columbia. Another great trip to the Yukon. We don't stop for one bison anymore, but we will stop for 3 on this side of the road and a 4th over here.
One of the funniest things about crossing back and forth over the border is that whenever we were in the British Columbia section, we saw a ton of wildlife, and then when we crossed over into the Yukon, there wasn't any. So apparently the wildlife don't like crossing the border either. Also, we've been joking a lot with it, but it does cross back and forth into the Yukon and British Columbia 3 times during this short section of the Alaskan Highway.
The 60th parallel where the north begins. The 60th parallel puts us with the Yukon, Northwest Territories, Finland, and Russia. We are way up here. It's just a small thing, but it's cool to be on latitude 60. I'm so excited about this, something I've been wanting to do for a long time. We have made it to the Yukon.
Now, we've been joking about that on the way up here, but in reality, we've been talking about how much we want to be here. This is a place that's associated, idyllic. It's like with danger and wild and the Canadian Mounties and people eking out an existence. So we are like crazy excited to be at this part of the world.
Also with that, we're officially in the Yukon now. There's one little section towards a couple days from now where we leave it again and come back in. But for the rest of this trip until we make it to Alaska, we are in the Yukon.
Believe it or not, based on the light, it was actually getting pretty late, so from here we just continued driving to Watson Lake, checked into our No Frills motel, and explored a little bit. The main thing to do in Watson Lake, and one of the most famous stops on the Alaska Highway, is the Signpost Forest. This was created by a homesick soldier in 1942 when he put up a sign that showed the direction to his hometown. The forest is massive now, with over 100,000 signs here from people who have driven the Alaska Highway over the last few decades. We only walked through for a few minutes as my dad had something he needed to do, and we were going to spend a lot more time here the next day.
Hey, look who I found. This is another great channel. Check out their video on the Alaska Highway. I will link to it in the description. Hey guys. Pops is teaching a class, and instead of just sitting there, I decided to go to the Northern Lights Center and to watch their movie.
The Northern Lights Center is basically just a theater with a few different displays you can see out in the lobby. The 100-seat theater is domed like one of the ones you'd see in a planetarium. After purchasing a ticket, you'll find whatever seat you want, and then they play 2 shows, one that rotates and one that's on the Northern Lights. This is definitely not what I expected at the Northern Lights Center, but it was a relaxing way to spend 45 minutes.
That was pretty fun. It was a show inside of a planetarium, and it had a planet movie first and a Northern Lights movie afterwards. If you're looking for a way to relax in Watson Lake, it's not a bad way to do it. That's it for day number 2 on the Alaska Highway. We will see you tomorrow for more. Morning, day 3 on the Alaska Highway. We are heading to get some coffee. Hopefully, there's only one spot in this town, and we're gonna go to one of the top stops along the Alaska Highway, the Signpost Forest. So we found the only coffee shop in this town. It is inside of a rec center, and the woman working there is very awesome. So I'm hopeful. Pops with the French toast. I went with the omelet.
Shout out to Lori, she's awesome, so definitely go see her if you're in Watson Lake looking for breakfast. Plus, it's connected to the Visitor Center, which has a lot of information on Alaska Highway history and the history of the Signpost Forest.
As of 2022, there are over 100,000 signs here. We're not the first person to leave a sign here.
Well, but ours will be the nicest.
Carl Lindley is the one who created the Signpost Forest, and there's recent pictures of him from when he came back and visited about a decade ago. Also, they have nails and hammers, so if you didn't bring your own, you can borrow one from them to put up your own sign.
All right, Pops, you got the hammer?
The hammer.
Ready to go?
Here we go.
All right, now's the moment of truth of whether we can find a place to put our sign.
Believe it or not, it's actually pretty hard to find a place to put up your sign. Pretty much all of the spots are taken unless you have a ladder so you can climb high up on the posts. They put new posts in often, but they get covered up as fast as they're put up. Eventually we found a spot for our sign though.
So Pops, what was your artistic inspiration with this?
ThrowMyLens.com. This is Josh's logo. Josh, Pops, 2023.
And you chose a cake pan as your medium?
Well, I was trying to find something to paint it on when we were already on the road, and so you can make cookies,
baking sheet,
or you can do this. So we got a great spot. I think it's going to be a good spot.
All right, so Pops is putting in the sign.
That's a long nail.
All right, I'm putting the other nail in. We've officially added our sign to the Signpost Forest in Watson Lake.
Success.
Right at ground level. You'll be able to find it, I'm sure. It's
Come in
easy.
and look towards the bottom.
But yeah, if you want to see our sign, it's right there, and it's kind of next to this building. But this is a massive place. Definitely come check it out. It's so much fun to see. And if you find our sign, be sure to send us a picture. There it is. A lot of people put them on trees because there's not a lot of space around here, but the lady at the visitor center told us not to put them on trees and that they're not counted if they're put on trees either. I walked around for 30 minutes last night. I couldn't find a spot, so I can't believe that we just walked in today and we were able to find one right at the bottom. Super fun. You gotta come here on the Alaska Highway, but we are heading on now towards Whitehorse.
During most of the days on the highway, I was the one that drove, and Pops looked at the milepost book to see what was coming up.
We found this awesome song for our Alaska drive. Neither one of us had heard it before, but if you're driving to Alaska, check it out. According to the book, this place is supposed to have well-priced souvenirs, but it's not open today, so let us know if it's well-priced when you come.
This spot is right outside of Watson Lake in an area called Nugget City.
This one's 24-hour self-serve, and there's a little pay machine in there. I'm fascinated by all the different gas stations that they have along the way and how you pump each one of them.
I had heard horror stories about how gas was on the drive, but it was never really an issue for us. We were driving a passenger vehicle and not towing anything, so we only filled up once a day when we got to our destination. I'm sure it'd be a little bit more difficult if you're driving an RV, and I've read many stories that say you should take Canadian cash because they don't always have working ATM machines at the gas station and you don't want to be left out to dry. Again, this wasn't an issue for us as all the pumps had working ATMs when we were there, but it's better to be prepared. Also, this drive from Watson Lake to Whitehorse is relatively remote during the first half without a lot of places to stop. After about an hour and a half of driving, we made it to our first real stop, which was Rancheria Falls.
Even though this trail is only a third of a kilometer, there's something cool about hiking in the Yukon. Pretty much the entire trip coming up, we haven't had any mosquitoes, but now that we've gotten to the Yukon, the Watson Lake area, we're getting some mosquitoes.
This short trail has a nice boardwalk that goes through a boreal forest on the way to the waterfall.
I hear a waterfall up ahead.
After about 7 minutes of walking, you'll reach the overlook that looks down on the waterfall. There's a boardwalk here that connects to multiple different viewing platforms of both the waterfall and the river.
There's also a second little cascade over there that you can walk to as well.
The main falls is only about 20 feet tall, but it's still a really nice stop.
This is a beautiful little spot. Two nice waterfalls, different color water. We've been used to this turquoise water and this is brown. I wonder about the path out here. It might be wheelchair accessible because it's got this nice wooden kind of pathway. So you'll have to check it out if you want to come out here and your person use the wheelchair.
These last 2 days, the scenery has just been incredibly impressive at every turn. Just a short little walk off the highway to see this. This is a beautiful drive.
As we drove on, almost immediately we saw a grizzly bear right on the side of the road.
Seeing that grizzly is next level. Look at that. Oh my gosh. This is pretty epic. Wow.
We thought it was going to walk into the bush, but it ended up sitting right along the side of the road for about 30 minutes.
This is so crazy. We're just looking at a grizzly on the side of the road. He's playing right now, Pops.
That's awesome.
Can you see him?
No.
Look at he's like rolling on his back.
Oh my gosh, what great shot.
He's literally just eating flowers right now.
Get a nice shot of him with a flower in his mouth for the wildlife part of the picture competition.
As you can tell by our random commentary, this was one of our favorite parts of the day.
Bye-bye, Bear. Thanks so much for hanging out with us for a little bit. That was one of the coolest experiences we've had on the drive so far. Pops, we've made it to the Continental Divide. Do you know what other video we did together where we reached the Continental Divide?
Maybe it was Route 66, maybe.
Route 66. We've reached the Continental Divide and we are right here.
The Continental Divide is basically what decides whether the rain that falls runs to the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean. It's always fun to see whenever we pass it on one of our road trips. As we continued on, we came across a black bear.
It's just so crazy that they're right next to the road and they're just like eating these plants.
We saw a couple more bears on this stretch of the highway, and it's so interesting that they don't care at all about people pulling over to the side of the road. None of the bears paid us any interest at all.
We just passed another black bear on the side of the road. That was our 10th black bear we've seen on our 3 days on the Alaska highway. Also, look, I got a nice welcome to the Yukon with a mosquito bite right on my forehead.
After that, we arrived in the town of Teslin, which is pretty much the biggest town between Whitehorse and Watson Lake. The town is known for its bridge, which is 446 meters long or 1,400 feet long. Once you cross the bridge, there's a couple different restaurants that you can eat at, but we pulled into the first one, which was a lodge, restaurant, and gas station.
I got a chicken quesadilla and Pop's got a hot roast beef sandwich, which apparently is one of his favorite things that I did not know that.
Oh yeah, I love it.
So we made it to our next stop, but Pops just can't stop commenting about his hot beef sandwich.
We stopped at this little place right here in Teslin and got a hot roast beef sandwich and it was fabulous.
So apparently if you want the best meal you're gonna have on the Alaska highway, go to the Yukon Hotel.
No argument here.
Next up, the George Johnson Museum.
George Johnson was a larger-than-life photographer and member of the Tlingit First Nation people group. I loved this museum and the people working there as I got to learn a lot more about this interesting man. He captured many photos of what Tlingit life was like between 1910 and 1940 before the Alaska Highway came by. He was also a legendary trapper and was responsible for bringing in the first car to the area. The first car had to come over 200 miles on the water, and there was no roads to drive it on, so he just drove it on the frozen lake and hunted from it. Pretty awesome. That's the car right there. And there's a picture of the car on the frozen lake. There are also a few other buildings on the property that you should explore before leaving the museum. This building is one of the only remaining communication buildings that the Alaska Highway was actually built to connect. It wasn't originally here, they had to move it here, but man, it is cool to see the history of this building. That was a fascinating museum and great people working there. So if you're interested in the area's history, see this one. On the way out of town, there's also a Tlingit Heritage Center that's definitely worth visiting if you want to learn more about the First Nations. You can't take any pictures inside, but it was a cool stop. After leaving, it was about 20 minutes to our next stop, which was right along the side of the road, and you definitely miss it if you're not looking for it. This little stop is the Canal Oil Project, which is basically a failed oil pipeline that they tried to build during the war, and then when it ended, they actually left all these cars and everything, and people scrapped them, and so it's kind of interesting to read about and to see these cars out here. If you want to see this, it's just a small rest area on the side of the road before you go over the Teslin River Bridge. Crossing over the Teslin River Bridge brings you into the town of Johnson's Crossing. Here you'll definitely want to turn out if you need to get gas, but if you don't need to get gas, you should still turn out to get cinnamon rolls. I told you, they love their cinnamon rolls on the Alaska Highway. Alright, this is the second world's best cinnamon rolls on the road. I already think this is probably not going to be as good, but you got to try all the cinnamon rolls you can try on the Alaska Highway.
I like that there's raisins in it. It's very doughy. I think the other one was better.
Yeah.
Crispiness on the outside. Yeah.
This looks like a very strong scone though. Plus they have coffee, which we haven't seen in a while, and you get a nice view while you're eating. I can confirm this one is actually pretty good, but it's definitely not as good as the other one. But I do like that Alaska Highway likes their cinnamon rolls, and I hope there's more that we can try on the drive.
Probably a good idea to stock up on some gas here if you need it, because it's a pretty remote section for a while until you get to Marsh Lake and then on to Whitehorse. Pretty soon is where you'll be reaching Jake's Corner, and from here you can take the road down to Carcross or even to Skagway. If you want to see more about that area, which includes the world's smallest desert, you can see that in our 24 Hours in Whitehorse video. For us though, we wanted to make sure we drove the entire Alaska Highway without going off of it at all, and so we stayed the course and continued on towards Whitehorse. Next up for us was Marsh Lake.
This is Marsh Lake, one of the largest lakes we've driven past. It's gigantic. It looks like it's a good place to hang out on the sand or do some water activities, but we're heading on.
From Marsh Lake, it's about 45 minutes into the town of Whitehorse, and so we just pushed on as that was our end destination for the day. Before getting into the city though, be sure you stop at Miles Canyon, which is one of the coolest places along the Yukon River.
We made it to our last stop of the day, Miles Canyon, with a suspension bridge.
Miles Canyon is infamous as one of the most difficult places to cross for people seeking gold during the Klondike Gold Rush. Here the rapids were so treacherous that it wasn't recommended to do unless you really knew what you were doing. Since then, they put in a dam downriver which rose the water levels significantly and made this area much less treacherous to go through.
How epic is this view from the suspension bridge? Look at the color of the water. Pops was saying he's excited about the river. Why is that?
Well, in reading about the Yukon Gold Rush, this was like the main route from the Pacific Ocean, if you can believe it, that went way back in here, and that's how steamboats did the providing of supplies and took everything out of there too. So this is an incredibly important river to the history of this area.
My dad loves all the history related to the Klondike Gold Rush and the Yukon River, so check out the 24 Hours in Whitehorse video where I surprise him with a boat tour of the river.
Just like that, day 3 on the Alaska Highway is done. We're heading to Whitehorse and we will see you tomorrow. Starting our 4th day on the Alaska Highway, we spent all day yesterday in Whitehorse, which you can see over here. And if you're here on a Sunday, no coffee shop is open, so Tim Hortons it is.
So Timmy's, they have the $7 Canadian meal, which is a sausage biscuit, a donut, and a coffee. That's a pretty strong start to the day right there.
What do you think?
This is the shortest day we had on the Alaskan Highway as we wanted to just focus on exploring Kluane National Park. From Whitehorse, it's about an hour-and-a-half drive to get to Haines Junction, which is the main central point that people start from when exploring the park.
There hasn't been a lot of stops today as we're making our way to the national park as quickly as we can, but we did want to see the Canyon Creek Bridge.
This bridge was an important crossing point for people during the Klondike Gold Rush. And then when the Alaskan Highway came by, they dismantled the old bridge and built a new one in 18 days. It's supposedly one of the most ambitious bridge buildings they did during the Alaska Highway. It was rebuilt in the 80s though, and not much of it is still here. From there we entered Kluane country with the mountain range out in front of us just continuing to get more and more majestic as we drove.
I looked at the purple flowers and it says they're a hay dress. I have no idea how to say that, but that's the purple flower on the side of the road.
After a short morning drive, we arrived at Haines Junction.
Made it into the town of Haines Junction. We're going to the visitor center before we start exploring the national park.
The visitor center is a good place to go to as Kluane National Park is so massive it can be hard to comprehend the sheer size. It's one of the 4 parks on the coastal part of Alaska and Canada that was designated a World Heritage Site for its ice fields landscape. Plus, the visitor center spotlights a lot of First Nations history, and there's rangers here if you want to ask questions about the park.
I weigh the same as 1.5 sheep.
I'm only 20% of a moose.
You're 90% of a grizzly.
90% of a grizzly. You better back up.
Check it out, this ice axe was used on the first ascent of Mount Logan, which is the tallest mountain in Canada. 1925. There's the Canyon River Bridge with people actually going across it. Talked to the people at the information center and they recommended a couple short trails throughout the park, so we're gonna see many different parts of the park on shorter trails, starting with the Rock Glacier Trail. Before heading into the national park, we're grabbing a sandwich so we can have a picnic somewhere fun.
Haines Junction is tiny, so there's not a lot of options, but we went to Village Bakery multiple times while we were there as it was a great spot for food and for coffee.
Got our sandwiches and pasta salad, heading into the park.
As we left Haines Junction, there was a sign that noted we were entering the national park, and it had a lot of information, including a map that showed the 4 parks that make up the UNESCO World Heritage Site. Our first stop was to drive over to Kathleen Lake, which is one of the most popular places in the national park.
I don't know, it's pretty hard to beat this spot for lunch. There are lots of mosquitoes though, and Pops overreacts hardcore when there's mosquitoes.
Overreaction is called self-protection.
Mosquitoes really like my camera for some reason. No idea why. Have you ever seen a better place for lunch? This is one of the best we've ever had, I think.
One of the best. It's rivals Yosemite.
That was a good lunch for us and for the mosquitoes as well. We're just gonna walk along this lake out to that point. There's also another trail here called the King's Throne Trail, which takes you up to right there, or you can go all the way to the summit, but it's not maintained.
If I had more time, I would have loved to have done the King's Throne Trail, but we wanted to make the most of our time in the park, so we were doing a lot of shorter trails.
We're heading out on the Kokanee Trail, which goes all the way over to here. This trail is only a half-kilometer round trip, and it is wheelchair accessible on an elevated boardwalk, so it's definitely a nice one. This is the end point for the wheelchair accessible portion, and you can also continue walking along the beach.
Since the trail was short and it was a nice day, we decided we wanted to continue hiking a little bit more to get around the bend and see what the views were like.
Well, there you go. They knew we were coming. 2 perfect red chairs with this view. Man, how do you beat this spot?
Yeah, these chairs are set up as a grizzling feeding area, you know, so you're unaware when you're sitting here. You think you're just looking, and all of a sudden, boom.
Out of the bushes comes a grizzly.
That's right. That's how they feed the population of bears here.
Something really cool about Parks Canada is that they actually have 400 of these red chairs, and you'll find them all over the country at different national parks. They're usually at the best viewpoints as well.
This is an incredible viewpoint, and it's basically 1 kilometer from the parking area. Now we're heading back to the car and to our next stop in the park.
If you don't have a lot of time in this area, definitely come down and see this spot. It's beautiful and something you'll never forget.
That was a good introduction to the national park.
Beautiful spot.
Heading on, we went about 15 minutes south to our next stop at the Rock Glacier Trail.
You are in bear country. You got the bear spray?
All right, we're ready to go.
The Rock Glacier Trail is about 2.4 kilometers or 1.5 miles round trip. The first half of the trail is beautiful with an elevated boardwalk that takes you over a marshy landscape before arriving at the Rock Glacier. From here, the trail is basically rock steps as far up as you want to go.
This rock mass that we're standing on is the edge of the former glacier that was here. It says that all rock glaciers have wave-like patterns, and it does kind of look like a wave as you're looking up at it. This is actually a pretty cool trail. The views are awesome and it's really well maintained, but it's crazy windy.
A rock glacier can actually be a couple different things. It can be rocks that cover ice and that actually have a real glacier underneath, or it can be like this one, which is just a big field of talus rock from where the glacier used to be. At this bench, there's an information plaque and it's basically the end of the trail. You can keep going all the way to the top, which is what I did, or you can just turn around here.
Reached the end of the trail, top of the rock glacier. They even built a little throne for me to sit on and relax with that view out there. And there's Pops way down there. This isn't a good trail for his knees, so he stopped. All right, we made it back down. You probably don't have to go all the way to the top. The views from where my dad stopped are really good, and it's less hard on your knees, but if you want to go to the top, it's good views up there as well. Now we're heading on to our next stop in the national park.
After a 20-minute drive, we made it back to Haines Junction and checked into our hotel at the Cozy Corner. It was a fine motel for what it is. There's not really a lot of options in this area. We decided to drive north about 45 minutes to the last hike we wanted to do in the national park called Soldier's Summit. You definitely don't have to do this as you'll be driving the same direction the next day if you're following the Alaska Highway, but I wanted to do a flight see over the national park and I knew that was going to take a lot of the morning, so we decided to head out and do this. Unfortunately, as we got close to the trailhead, the wind had kicked up and basically created a dust storm on this section near the lake.
We've made good progress along the Alaska Highway. We are here. So we drove all the way out here because we were going to do a longer hike that was right next to this one. But if you see all that haze, that's just dust and dirt blowing through that canyon. So it's not a nice time to do that hike. We're just going to do this short trail and then head back to Haines Junction.
If you're interested in Alaska Highway history, then this is a trail you absolutely have to do. The trail walks to the location where the opening ceremony of the highway took place.
This is all about the Alaska Highway, and it says the soldiers could complain if they wanted to, but there wasn't anybody to complain to. They could run off, but there was nowhere to run. They were there.
This trail is about 1.5 miles or 2.4 kilometers long. It's a pretty easy trail with a gradual incline, and as you continue to head up, you'll get great views over the lake. Along the way, there's many different information plaques that tell you a lot more about the Alaska Highway history.
We've made it to the end point. There's flags, information, some chairs, you can see that up there.
At the top, you'll find an American and a Canadian flag, plus a plaque that commemorates the opening of the Alaska Highway.
What's interesting about this hike is that we're actually hiking on the old 1942 Army Road. So we drove in on this one, but they cut it through here because it was hard to go around the lake and it needed almost constant maintenance from the way that the lake waters come in and out.
There's a few more of those famous red Parks Canada chairs here too.
If you want to take a break and just soak it in, there's two nice red chairs like we had earlier today. Another pretty good view. You can see the dust is just getting worse. You can barely even make out the mountains on the other side. All right, now we're making the 45-minute drive back to Haines Junction. Gonna find something to eat, then call it a night.
On the way back, the dust conditions worsened, but once we left the lake basin, they actually cleared up pretty good. This was the perfect time as we saw a field of purple wildflowers that we pulled off to take pictures and got to see them with the stunning mountains behind them. I can't understate how beautiful this section of the drive is, as these types of mountains are just something that you never see. Once we made it back into Haines Junction, we stopped to see this unique art piece which is right in the center of town before heading over to get something to eat.
So that spot's known as the Animal Cupcake in town and is right next to Mile 116 Pub, which is where we're gonna have dinner. Outside of the main towns like Dawson Creek and Whitehorse, it's basically burgers is what you're gonna have on this route.
This was pretty much the only place in town that was open, but it wasn't a bad spot for dinner.
Back at our hotel, it's the end of day 4 on the Alaska Highway, and tomorrow we're actually heading into Alaska.
After spending so much time in the national park yesterday, I really wanted to be able to experience the true national park, which is more than just what you see from the road. I called up one of the flight seeing tours, and luckily they had one spot available for me on the morning flight.
We are doing this tour today.
Unfortunately, they didn't have a spot for Pops, but he wasn't too upset about it as he didn't really want to go on a small airplane. I set out on an 1.5-hour flight seeing tour, and I have to say it was one of the highlights of my entire time on the Alaska Highway. I'm just gonna play a few clips for you here of some of the top highlights, but I have a full video on this on my channel if you want to see more. We got pretty much the perfect day for our flight with almost no wind and no clouds. Mount Logan, which is the tallest mountain in Canada, basically creates its own weather system, so it was pretty much the only thing on the horizon that had any clouds. This collection of parks has some of the biggest non-polar ice fields in the entire world. And once you see them, they basically stretch out as far as you can see with untouched snow. It's honestly unlike anything I've ever seen before. Plus, the mountains here are staggering and the glaciers are basically everywhere. I think the flight was around $300 when I went, but it was well worth it and it was just incredible the entire time. I was actually surprised by how well I fit inside of this airplane, and it had little window slots where you could stick your camera out to take pictures, which was pretty cool.
Made it back from the flight adventure, one of the coolest things I've ever done in my entire life. Shout out to Stuart, that guy is amazing, who's a pilot, nicest guy basically I've ever met. So if you come out here, tell Stuart I said what's up if you do it, and definitely do it if you can. Incredible. Now I'm gonna pick up Pops and we are heading back on the Alaska Highway. I saw these mountains from above. They're not as exciting from down below when you get to see them from above.
You know, some people got to see some things and they become obnoxious.
No, that's definitely me.
We started with the 45-minute drive we had done the previous day along the beautiful mountain range with all the wildflowers, and then finally arriving at the lake. Luckily for us this time, the dust storm was gone and it was just beautiful views. There's a national park visitor center here, and supposedly they often have views of sheep on the hillside, so we decided to pull in and see that. We didn't see any sheep when we were there, but it was a great spot to ask the rangers any questions you had on the park.
Fun little area in here for families to hang out with some really great views.
So it's interesting, if you look over here, you can kind of see this cut in the hillside. That is the original Alaska Highway, right there, that winded up around there. And when we were at Soldiers Access. That was that continuation of that. And he wasn't sure exactly when, but then later it was paved and moved down closer to the lake itself. It is so cool to be able to see the original road going through the mountainside there.
Heading on, we continued driving around the lake until we made it to the town of Burwash Landing. Here they have the Kulani Museum of History, which we were told was one of the best museums on the drive.
Oh look, they have Josh in the display. A loon.
How's the black bear feel?
Very coarse, not like the grizzly. The grizzly was rough.
The grizzly you pet on the side of the road?
The grizzly, no, this one doesn't feel quite as soft. There's a different museum.
This museum is especially good if you want to learn more about the wildlife that you'll see in this part of the Yukon.
This is what I flew over today, and look at that. That's what the plane looked like.
Don't forget to go outside and see some of the old buildings and the large gold pan that they have on display.
This is a way better museum than you'd expect to see in a small town like this. There's animals, there's First Nations history, there's mining history, some old cabins. It's worth checking out.
As we continued on, we started to leave the beautiful mountain ranges of Kulani National Park behind and head towards Alaska. This is also where the road starts to become pretty bad, and it continues all the way to the end in Delta Junction. Here we encountered a lot of dirt roads, sections of construction, and a lot of frost heaves. Frost heaves are one of the most dangerous things for people driving the Alaska Highway with RVs. Basically, these are like speed bumps in the middle of the road where the ice has actually pushed up parts of the highway. The hard thing about it is that the location can change, so where there was one a previous week, there might not be one the next week. This is a pretty remote section, and there's not a lot going on until you reach the town of Beaver Creek, which is the westernmost town in Canada. Here you'll find a visitor center, some gas stations, a few motels, and a few restaurants. We didn't really stop anywhere ourselves though, and we just kept going towards the border.
We're about to cross over into Alaska, but we gotta stop at the international border before we go across.
As you drive north, you'll actually get to the international border before you go through customs to get back into the United States.
Pops is in Canada, and I am in the United States.
From what I've seen of British Columbia and Yukon, I think I'll stay on this side.
This is a cool spot to take some pictures along the border and to see how the borders cut through the trees out into the distance.
We made it to Alaska!
Woohoo!
It's really bad to film out there right now with all the construction, but we have made it to Alaska 5 days into the Alaska Highway journey. I'm so excited to be back. Are you excited?
It's so cool. I'm so excited to be back in Alaska, yeah.
That is assuming they let us back in.
It's always a possibility that one of us will not be left. Yeah.
From there, it's only about a 5-minute drive to reach the border crossing to go back into the United States.
Well, we made it back into the United States, but Pops tried to joke with the guy, and he was not having any jokes. So I thought I might have to leave Pops at the border. I'm glad he made it in.
I guess my joke was not bad enough though that I had to be retained.
Detained, yeah.
It was bad, but not bad enough.
Our welcome into Alaska is on gravel roads.
As we crossed over the border, our first stop was at the Tetlin Wildlife Refuge.
Come in and rest your wings. Don't mind if I do.
This refuge is protected and located right along an important corridor that migrating birds use.
One of Pop's favorite things is being able to put a pin in the map because there's less pins than there normally are right near California.
There we go.
There's a lot of information here at the visitor center, and there's also hikes and other things you can do here, but we didn't do anything else while we were on this drive.
One note, if you travel in Alaska during the summer, it is construction time and there's often a lot of construction going on. This is our third time we've stopped since we've been in Alaska, and we've waited for probably an hour now at the different construction sites. Any thoughts, Pops?
I don't like construction sites. They make you wait too long. There's just a lot of construction on this road. You would think it'd be much more developed than it actually is, but there's a lot of work being done.
Yeah, a lot of damage in the winter, I guess, that they have to fix in the summer.
So yeah, just plan on everything taking a little bit longer than you think, especially when you enter Alaska during the summer construction season. And be careful with those frost heaves and potholes as you're driving along this part of the highway.
We rushed through Tok because we wanted to go to Mukluk Land, which is a popular spot with lots of silly stuff. It's only open from 2 to 7 every day, but unfortunately today it's closed for family illness. We do not get to experience it.
Luckily, on the way back through this area a couple months later, we were able to go to Mukluk Land, so here's a few clips from that.
Check it out, you can play tetherball here. There's a jumper you can jump in, and right here we have Santa's rocket ship. I didn't realize that Santa went in a rocket ship, but makes sense. Faster way to travel. And here in this unassuming house, we have a whole bunch of dolls. I challenge you to whack-a-mole.
Challenge accepted. Mukluk Land. And if you're in this area, come. These are really, really nice people here.
Yeah, it's just a fun, silly spot, and the people are great, so.
It was late in the day when we got back to Tok, so only one restaurant was open, Fast Eddie's.
We skipped lunch today and just had breakfast and a little bit of snacks, so we are ready for food. Hopefully Fast Eddie's is fast. Fast Eddie's was fast and a good spot for dinner. We are calling it a night. It's been a long day. We will see you tomorrow to finish our time on the Alaska Highway. We stayed at this great little B&B last night called a Hideaway, which is about 5 minutes outside of town. Made breakfast for us in the morning. It was an awesome stop, and now we have 2 hours left to finish the Alaska Highway. We headed into the town of Tok for a few stops. We heard that this was a good gift shop, and apparently it has an animal display as well.
Since most everything was closed when we got in the previous day, we decided to head back in town and do a couple stops. The first was this gift shop, which was actually pretty massive, and I have to say the prices were not too bad here.
Not a bad store. I got a bear for 12 bucks and shirts for $10.99 or something for my kids, so not too bad. Heading on.
The other stop we made was at the Tok Visitor Center just to see if they had any history on the Alaska Highway, and my dad wanted to talk to them about fishing in Alaska, which he was planning to do later.
There is a little information on the Alaska Highway here if you want to see it.
Saying goodbye to Tok, we headed out on the last 2-hour portion of the drive to get to Delta Junction. A lot of people who do this drive actually don't finish it because they leave from Tok and head down to Anchorage, which is quicker, but we wanted to make sure that we saw the entire thing, and so that's why we went to Delta Junction. There are not a lot of stops along this section, but we did pull off at Moon Lake Recreation Area. This looked like a pretty cool campground, and it had a beautiful lake with butterflies flying around the shore. What's not to like? As we headed forward, we crossed the Johnson River and started to get great views of the Alaskan Range out in front of us. The Alaska Range is one of the most staggering mountain ranges in all of Alaska, and I'm always excited to see it every time I'm here.
As you can see, Highway 2, the Alaska Highway, is almost connected with Highway 4 in Delta Junction.
And just like that, about 2 hours after we left Tok, we arrived at the end of the Alaskan Highway, Delta Junction.
All right, so we have made it to the end of the road, but before we go to the end of the road sign, we're going to the Sullivan Roadhouse Museum.
So this building used to be on the Fairbanks Valdez Trail. It was right here, and then when the road came in, it made this unnecessary, and so they kind of closed this area off, and then they moved it over here, and that's where we're at, standing in it now.
Roadhouses were a very important part of Alaska's history. These houses were spaced apart so that trappers and people traveling between the big towns could have places to stay on their journey. While most of them have been destroyed, it's really cool to be able to see one preserved this well right here in Delta Junction.
There's a farmer's market here on Wednesdays if you happen to come through on a Wednesday. All right, well, we can't put off the end of this drive for too much longer, so we're heading across the street to officially finish the Alaska Highway.
Right at the junction of Highway 2 and Highway 4 is the Visitor Center, which has the end of the Alaska Highway sign.
We have made it to the end of the Alaska Highway.
Sweet. Such a
Delta
gorgeous
Junction,
road.
1,400 miles. That was a good one.
What's crazy to me about this one in particular is that 2 years ago we were at that exact spot and I said this in my previous clip. The end of the Alaskan Highway. We didn't drive this, but that'd be a cool road trip in the future. 1,422 miles.
Let's do it.
I didn't even know what the Alaska Highway was, but it's so cool that we're back here 2 years later and actually got a chance to drive it. These are the things I never thought I was going to be able to do, and I am so thankful for them.
You'll definitely have to wait for your turn to take photos here, as there's always a lot of people doing it. The visitor center also has some information on the Alaska Highway, but it's pretty small and it's mostly just a shop to sell goods.
Luckily, we were able to avoid any bison breaking our car on the Alaska Highway. Northern terminus of the Alcan Highway. And just like that, another road trip is done. The Alaska Highway was amazing. That's not the end of our time in Alaska. We're gonna spend an entire month here, and you can see all the other videos right here. Before we left though, we did have to sacrifice Pops to the mosquito, unfortunately. They required a sacrifice to continue on.
But we will see you on the next video.
That was so dumb, but come on, give us a like for that, right? I mean, Pops had to get on the ground for that one. Did you help? Well done, Alaska Highway. All right, we'll see you guys later.